Hey guys, I've managed to put about 5 hours of music through the preamp. I figure by now all the components have had a chance to break in and settle down. I haven't noticed any difference in the sound quality over those 5 hours. I have had a chance to do some comparative listening between this preamp and my other solid state preamp that I have, and do some critical listening all at the same time. I must say I'm quite impressed with the sound quality of this preamp. Everything just sounds richer and fuller. Now I am aware that I have a bias towards this preamp. I have a lot of time invested in assembling it, so that might influence my interpretation of the sound. So I am still planning on doing some blind listening tests once I figure out what the test is going to be, when I have time to do that. It will be interesting to see whether or not I can pick out this preamp when compared to my old preamp. But for now, I'll give you a review, what I think, and just a little summary of how the build went and some tips and tricks if you are planning to do this build yourself. So a little bit of background. I've been looking to bring tubes into my setup for a long time. The easiest way to do this, I figured, was to get a tube preamp for my turntable. Looked around, shopped around a lot. I finally ended up deciding to go with the Tavish design vintage Phono Preamp. The only problem was there was no assembled versions. The only thing they had was the bare circuit board. So what I did, made the decision to assemble it myself. That's what we ended up with. The videos for the project are on my channel. I'll leave a link in the description below. So it was important for me to make sure that whatever preamp I bought actually used the tubes as part of the amplifier section. A lot of the cheap tube amplifiers, tube preamplifiers, only use the tubes as buffers, or even worse, they just have the heaters on and nothing else is connected. There's just some op amps in there that do all the work. You can pull the tubes out and nothing changes. For this preamplifier, the moving magnet signal path has no transistors, no transistor-based amplifiers in the signal path. The amplification is all done by the 3 tubes. In the moving coil signal path, there are 2 JFET amplifiers at the input stage. After that, it's passed to the tubes and they do the rest of the work. Now, I had a lot of fun building this preamp. In my opinion, it's something that can be done by virtually anybody. You need a little bit of skill soldering, but that can be picked up with a very, very small amount of practice. You don't need any fancy soldering irons or fancy multimeters. A cheap $20, 20 or 40 watt soldering iron will work perfectly fine as long as it has a reasonably fine tip, and a $20 multimeter from your local hardware store will do perfectly fine. All you have to use it for is to check a couple voltages, as you've seen in my previous videos, and check continuity between your solder joints and the signal paths on the board. The manual for this preamp is very well laid out. All the components are listed in detail, along with which suppliers to buy them from and the product code for the supplier. So they're really easy to look up and they're really easy to find. Now, if you're a beginner, my suggestion is that you buy the bare circuit board with the surface mount JFET amplifiers already soldered on. It's not much more money, and I think if you work it out, you end up paying about $7 extra because you're getting the amplifiers with the board, and they cost a couple dollars each to begin with. So if you're a beginner, you don't want to worry about surface mount components. Purchase the board with the amplifiers already on. If you're using a lower power soldering iron, a 20 or a 40 watt, use the old school lead tin solder. It flows really easily. It's very, very simple to work with, and you're more likely to get a good joint when you're soldering. Projects like this may seem a bit intimidating, and even I got kind of annoyed with soldering. There are a lot of components to get through on here, but if you're organized and you're methodical about soldering components on and checking the continuity after you've soldered them on, making sure everything works out, It'll save you a lot of headaches in the end. And sure enough, that's what I did. I checked all the continuity after I had soldered each batch of components on, and I had no problems. Powered up right away. The relays clicked over, and I had no problems to overcome. So I'll just outline the things that I did differently during this build as opposed to what's listed in the manual. I swapped out all the signal capacitors. Originally they are the WEMA film capacitors, as you can see down here. I substituted the sold and fast caps. Not sure that's going to make any difference in the sound. Just wanted to make my preamp a little different, a little more unique. On the voltage regulators, instead of having them laying flat on the board, I have them standing up with small heat sinks attached. Turns out this one doesn't get very hot at all. It's barely warm to the touch. This one is quite hot though, and while they are designed to run at the higher temperatures, I just feel a little more comfortable when they're up off the board and have a heat sink on them to dissipate a little more heat. Now another thing I would do differently is I would mount the board closer to the front. The reason I originally mounted it towards the back is there are PCB mounted input and output RCA jacks as well as a switch. The problem with that is it's virtually impossible to drill the holes in the proper spot so that everything lines up. I had already ordered the PCB mount RCA jacks, so I used them anyway and just ran wire leads to where they go on the board. Again, if I was to do it over again, I'd move the whole circuit board forward and I'd use these chassis mount RCA jacks and then just wire leads onto the board. And then I'd also again order the proper switch. That's a chassis mount switch and a chassis mount power plug and grounding screw. So how does it sound? I've always found it difficult to describe audio, and I've never liked using I've never liked the terms that people use to describe audio. We'll start with the simple stuff. This preamp is dead quiet. There's no hums, hiss, anything like that. It's really quiet. The best way I can describe it is the sound is just a lot fuller. Especially on the bottom end. I run this in reference stereo mode, which means there is no digital processing at all. The analog signal is passed directly to the volume control, then to the amplifier and out to the speakers. The balance is dead on. The imaging is really good. If you close your eyes, you figure everything is dead center right in front of you. And the bottom end is really full. I listen to a lot of rock, mid to late 90s, alternative, grunge. And the guitars really come through. They really growl with this preamp, where there was always something lacking in my other solid state preamp. Not to say that it was bad in any way. This is just better. Now where this might lack a little bit is on the top end. I notice it a little bit. The solid state preamp seems to be just a little bit more precise on the highs, but if it is there, it's barely noticeable. I'm really impressed with this preamp. Now those are just my initial thoughts on the sound. Again, I am very curious to do the blind listening test, not just with me, but with, hopefully I can convince a few of my friends to spend some time and do some blind listening tests. Very interested to see the results for that. This will definitely be staying in my setup. Again, I really like the sound of it. In terms of the cost, I did end up saving about $250 off the retail price. I did think I was going to save a bit more, but this thing is jam-packed with really high-quality components. The guys at Tavish Design really did their homework, and Everything is well thought out, and there's really high quality components that go into this. As a consequence, they cost more when you go and buy them, even just buying loose components. Now, that being said, it's not that you do save the money, but you lose other things. Obviously, Tavish Designs have a very nice case that goes along with it. I just ended up with a generic case with random holes cut in it. It doesn't really bother me. It might bother some people. If it was up to me, if it was just me, I would have just mounted the board on a piece of acrylic. I think the bare circuit board looks really nice. The problem is there's high voltage on this. Remember, we set one of the pots at 210 volts, so there's some pretty high voltage. If you have young kids, it is never a good idea to leave circuit boards that have high voltage on just open. Always a good idea to keep it covered. The other thing Tavish Design does is they make sure that the first tube in the signal path is a low noise tube. Obviously, I have no way of checking that, but again, I don't know that it makes any difference. My preamp is dead quiet and sounds really good, so I'm not too worried about it. Alright, that about does it for this review. Again, nothing really negative to say about it. I really like this preamp. Look forward to using it for many years to come. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this project, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye.